Los Angeles is home to the largest Salvadoran population outside of El Salvador. And for me, that's personal. I was born in El Salvador, raised in Toronto, and a big reason I moved to LA was to reconnect with my roots, to understand what it means to be Salvadoreño in a city where our culture is alive and evolving. Today's guest is Tony Escoto, the creator of Bayuncos, one of the most recognizable Salvadoran platforms in the US. What started as a joke quickly turned into a movement. Bayuncos blends humor, history, and culture, spotlighting the nuances of Salvadoran identity in a world that often overlooks us. Tony represents a generation of Salvies, born in the US but deeply rooted in the motherland. Through comedy, language, and cultural pride, he's building something bigger than content. He's building connection. This conversation is about what it means to be a minority within a minority, about reclaiming our narrative, and about how a small tropical country can leave a global mark. If you enjoy this conversation, please remember to drop a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel.
This right here is the first official time that I sit on somebody else's podcast.
Amazing, bro. That's an honor for me, man.
So Jose, you know Jose?
Yeah, Jose?
Yeah, Colocho. So we had this one thing when I was still over there on his side of town, because he lives kind of like at the edge of like down East Southgate.
Right.
And I was in Long Beach, so he was about maybe 15 minutes away from me, not that far. We used to do this thing called the Fake Podcast.
Okay.
And the Fake Podcast, all that it was literally just like a mini podcast setup where we would talk about something, either like promoting something or actually just like a fun hot take or whatever.
Right.
We would talk about that for maybe like 2 minutes and then edit it down into just a clip. But there was no full episode.
Right.
It was literally just little clips like that. And then like people started asking like, oh, so where can I get the full episode? Where can I get the full episode? And we had to like basically be like, we would tell people like, no, there's no podcast. This is literally just, yeah. So we just call it the Fake Podcast. But other than that, like I did now with Jose's essentially like whole, production thing that he's working on right now with Field TV. That was the first time that I sat down and actually was interviewed. But the thing was, I felt like that was still very much in-house. This is the first time that I'm actually going like outside.
Right.
There's, people with like little podcasts, that want to, somehow they get a hold of me, like if it's through email or if it's through my personal account. Yeah, I usually tell people the best way is my personal account. Because that one, I will never be able to scroll down to the bottom of all of that.
Right. I think I hit you on Bayuncos and I never heard back, but I'm still like, yo, this guy's doing cool stuff. I'll find a way to get in contact with you eventually. And I did. I went through your personal, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, bro, thank you for coming through, man. Like I said, I've been wanting to build with more Salvadoreños here and really promote, like I'm from Toronto. I was mentioning this to you off camera, but I'm from Toronto. And in Toronto is interesting because similar to LA, it's like an immigrant hub. There's a lot of people from different parts of the world that come, but Latinos are not the predominant, immigrant group, and specifically Salvadoreños either. Like, forget about it. We're like a smaller demographic. So, as I'm doing research and stuff, I'm like, man, LA is cool because outside of El Salvador, it's recognized as the biggest hub for Salvadoreños, right? So talking to you, like, I just want to get like a feel for even what does it mean to you to be a Salvadoreño here in LA? What is that like for you here?
I mean, so being Salvadoreño here in LA, I will say it's one of those things where you're a minority group inside of a minority group. And so for a long time, there wasn't really any type of representation, like visible representation. Maybe we had stuff that we ourselves through the grapevine knew about, or certain figures in the community that we might have been able to point the finger to and say, oh yeah, he's one of us. But for the most part, it was just kind of very small, very community based, even though we're a large demographic out here, and it's definitely been growing ever since. But growing up, it was definitely something where you have, say, your identity between yourself, between your family. And then at some point you kind of like realize, wait a second, we are different from maybe the other Latinos that actually live in this area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
That was like being very young, and then obviously more getting a little bit older, then you start noticing that there's a little bit sometimes, I think it's getting less now, but for a long time back then, there was a lot more animosity between other Latino groups. The ones that predominate here in this area against us.
Predominantly
and vice versa.
Mexicanos?
Yeah.
Or- yeah.
And then sometimes vice versa. You know what I mean? There were girls that I couldn't even really date that much because their parents were not down with her bringing home a dude who wasn't Mexican.
Wow.
You know.
And so this is fairly, I mean, you're a young guy. This is fairly recent we're talking about, within the last decade or so, right?
Yeah, about that, you know, it's yeah, and I think that now, like, why do I say that it's getting less? It's just because of Bayuncos, because of all the stuff that I've been involved in. I've met a lot of people who from outside of the community who think that the BS is BS. You know, they think that the beef is, you know, BS, and they think that, or maybe they have a partner or a spouse that now is Salvadoreño, or some of their friends are Salvadoreños or Central Americans, and so they've learned, come to see the light that basically, like, why do we got to be like this? You know, why do we got to have this type of animosity towards each other? I understand, like, when it's like the big wave of the newest wave of immigrants that comes to anywhere, usually they become a target,
Right.
you know. And so, especially when, say, their lineage has been here since before California was even part of the United States, you know. So it's like, I know that there's like a certain level of almost kind of protection and almost like keeping things within the community from the outside.
Right.
Does that make sense? I understand that. But at the same time, you know, we're still equally worthless in the eyes of the greater American conversation. So
Right. It's a good way to put it. I mean, from an outsider looking in, we're all one race. But when you're inside, you see the differences. You see the differentiations between the cultures. Oh, and if you're an outsider too, if you want to take the time to learn, you'll learn what the differences are, right? But I find that, like, for me, again, my experience growing up in Toronto, like, my wife is Mexicana. So I, as a Salvadoreño, that conflict that you're describing is the opposite in Toronto, because as Latinos, we band together. My closest homies were Nicaragüense, Guatemaltecos, and my wife is Mexicana, but all in Toronto as immigrants, we banded together. And I think that the experience that you're describing is interesting because, like you said, when you think about, like, Chicanos here, there's a term for Mexicanos that are born here. What are Salvadoreños called that are born in the U.S.? What do we call ourselves here?
Most people refer to themselves as Salvi.
Salvi.
Yeah, and so that it's something that it's a term that has been around for a while. You know, it has its own history too. I'm not like a super expert in the actual etymology behind it, but I can tell you that for the most part, more say kids born here or abroad that are of Salvadoreño descent call themselves Salvi. Like, I was laughing about this literally with the homies the other day, where we do the events not far from here with Ambiente Central, which is basically like a Central American collective that puts on events. You know, like, it's like our generation and stuff. So it's like all, you know, it's Salvadoreños, Hondurans, Belize, Guatemala, Nicaragua. You know, everybody's there. And the thing is that one of those nights I was talking to some girl, and she's all like, "I'm hella Salvi," something like that. And I'm thinking to myself, and I kind of like laughed with my homies that are actually from El Salvador. Right. And me, like, this is the kind of stuff that basically this is like the big difference, where it's like, you know, the Salvi crew or the Salvi group of people out here still do feel that love and that connection with the country, even if they're still somewhat disconnected. They might not understand every single reference or every cultural specific thing or what it's like to live in El Salvador, or maybe even know all of the slang, the history, whatever. You know, there's a lot of stuff that they still don't know, but they still are very, very proud to be Salvadoreño or to be of Salvadoran descent in a world where our community has been greatly overlooked.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. I'm finding that the newer generation, a lot of younger Salvis, even born in Toronto, Canadians, they rep El Salvador like they're from there. And I love to see that pride, but it's also fascinating to see that they're almost longing for an attachment to belong to and understand their cultural background.
Exactly.
Versus than just assimilating to where they live, right?
Yeah, because that's what happens here in LA. Like I can speak to it mostly LA, a little bit in the East Coast because I lived in Boston for a bit in one summer. But what I've noticed is like Salvadoreños, because we are a minority within a minority, in the greater, say, Latin American, Caribbean diaspora of what is it to be Latino, it's very common for Salvadoreños to do exactly what you just said, kind of assimilate. Sometimes they adopt the way of speaking of another, flag, or the same slang or the accent. Like it's actually quite like amazing. Like here in LA, the most common thing is that I've met many Salvi kids that speak like Mexicans or like Chicanos. They just speak they even use way, or they use, no mames, pinche, like all of that stuff. But they still will, but when you ask them, like, are you Mexican or are you Chicano or whatever, they'll be like, no, I'm Salvadorian, or I'm Salvi. Does that make sense? And the same thing over there in the East Coast. Like I've met, some Salvadoreños. I want to say it's a little bit less over there, but I have met some that more align, like either Puerto Rican, Dominican,
for sure,
stuff like that.
Yeah.
I want to say I hadn't seen the same type of animosity out there, only because I feel like with the Puerto Rican homies, with the Dominican homies, and us, we're all tropical Latinos, and I feel like if we're all kind of on a similar wavelength, that we have not been able to, or at least back then, we had not been able to establish, say, with the Mexican homies. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think here, Mexico's a big country. So it's like, you have, I think the most common immigrants from Mexico here, I think might be from like the border towns or other areas,
right,
where it's not necessarily a tropical area. It's like desert.
Right, right.
And I don't know if that has, again, it's my theory. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I can tell you that, like, there's something to be said when you bond with other Latinos that are tropical and you say, wait a minute, you guys eat plátano too? Oh, we eat plátano. Yeah, we fry plátano, or we make it this way. You know what I mean? Stuff like that.
Right, right. That's fascinating, man. I have never put thought into that component of perhaps the landscape changes the approach, right?
Yeah, like the climate or just the vibe. Like I don't know what it is about us tropical people, but we're like, but I that's one thing. Put that on my gravestone. We are tropical people first. Like that's, if there's anything that. Because that's the other thing. Is like a lot of the times, I'll have conversations with people at the events that we do. And they'll say stuff like, oh yeah, because of, you and a few other people, on social media, we're kind of like rediscovering or reconnecting almost for the very first time what it is to be, say, Central American or Salvadoreño or whatever. What would you say is like kind of like the main, like that thing that really sets us apart? And then usually my first answer is like, who are the most of your homies? Okay, well, they're Mexican or whatever. Or they're white, or okay, well, above all else, in Central America, we are tropical people first. We are tropical people first. Like the Mexican homies here in LA, they have their own thing. There's a lot of like, say, what might come to your mind when you visit, say, just across the border in Mexico and stuff, like the landscape, the natural beauty that you might see, the towns and stuff. But then when you think about us, is like, it's palm trees, it's volcanoes, it's coconuts, it's beaches, it's drum, that's who we are.
Make me want to go back home, man. That's beautiful. Let's talk about Bayuncos, bro, because so I came across your page, somebody shared something, it came across my feed. And from the first post that I saw, I don't even remember which one it was because I've been following you for so long now. But like, I just fell in love with what you were doing. Because the minute I'm like, this is hilarious. I love somebody talking about our accent, talking about our food, talking about like very Salvi specific things. And like you said, I'm used to, and I love supporting Latino centric things. So I'll support, things about Latin cuisine, whatever. I love Latino culture. But to find a page that was dedicated to just Salvadoreño culture for me was like a gem. I'm like, I got to follow this guy. I started following your stuff. And I just love that you do an amalgamation and you fuse music with comedy, with very, a very prideful take on being Salvadoreño. Like, tell me what made you even start this? Like, how did this come about?
It was a joke. It was a literal joke. It was not something that was planned. It was something that started out of pure impulse. That it was Christmas. Well, you know how like we tend to celebrate Christmas Eve, Noche Buena,
right?
And then Christmas Day is a little bit more laid back. And so Christmas Day is the laid back day after already having had celebrated Christmas Eve with the family and everything. And then Christmas Day is with, still family, but everything's a little bit more laid back, no, like maybe now we're having like, instead of like dos pijazos de ron, quizás un tapiz, or something like in our coffee. And at some point, La Chelita, she tells me, just kind of like, she's seeing the family enjoying themselves and everything, hearing the music, and she's like, someday I would really like to spend Christmas in El Salvador. And I'm like, are you sure? Like, do you know what Christmas in El Salvador looks like? And she's all like, no, but I imagine that it's kind of like this. I was like, let me show you what it looks like. So I get on TikTok real quick, and I'm showing her what's happening the night before, essentially, which is basically La Guerra de Silvadores, Los Morteros.
Los Morteros.
Yeah, Los Morteros número 5, Los Toritos. And so...
Los Fulminantes, right?
There's La Abejita. Well, La Abejita's not that bad, but that one, I feel like you gotta be careful with that one because that thing will fly off in the way that you least expect it. La Metralleta, like all of these different fireworks,
Yeah.
But more than anything, La Guerra de Salvador is like literally people having firework brawls in the street. And so so I told her, this is what's happening. Do you really want to spend time in the middle of all this? You as a white girl. And so we kind of started laughing about that. And we kind of were like, we said something like, there needs to like exist some piece of content that captures this exact moment of like my white girlfriend wants to spend Christmas in El Salvador and then show El Salvador, something like that during Christmas. And so I spent about maybe 20 minutes looking for something like that on social media just so that I could reshare it to my stories. And I couldn't find anything that was that specific. So I was like, whatever, like I'll make an account real quick. I'll make it myself and I'll just post it, just cuts, And I saw that the name Bayuncos, well, actually at the very beginning it was, I put Somos Bayuncos was the way that it first came to be. Later on we changed it to Bayuncos after we hit 10K, but the thing was that that we posted that very first thing and it did well. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, that's interesting. So then let me see if I could do that again. So then I started doing other stuff just every single day. And there was no goal. It was just all for fun. That's the crazy part. It just all started from as something fun to do during the day. And from that Christmas Day, which was 2021 to April of the following year, so 2022, like about 4 months later, it took us about 4 months or so to go from 0 followers to just 350 individual followers. And then something that I posted that month in April took us from 350 to over 10K in about a week and a half. Wow. And that's when we decided to take it seriously. I was like, okay, well, maybe something's here. And the thing is this, is like, Bayuncos wasn't the first, but there were other accounts and personalities that have been around long before Bayuncos. But I think that Bayuncos was in a weird place because it had, we tried to keep everything at the very beginning, very bilingual. And so you had your Spanish for people in El Salvador, making references to specific things in El Salvador. And then you had your English stuff that was a little bit more generalized, like almost kind of like entry-level Salvadoreño humor, which would be more up the Salvi alley. Mm-hmm. And so it was something that we were, figuring it out, when it actually was really going, how do you say it in English? Impulso, momentum.
Momentum.
Yeah, when it was really having a lot of momentum. And so from there, it just turned into this thing that I didn't expect. It wasn't something that I sought out, like I wanted to be like a content creator or anything like that. It just kind of like happened. And that was it. And now I want to say Bayuncos is probably one of the more recognizable,
for sure,
at least in the States, for Salvadoreño kind of like humor. And it is it's part humor, it's part somewhat educational for maybe the Salvi who doesn't know every single thing about El Salvador. So it's definitely, you know, sometimes we troll people a little bit where it's like, you know, we'll make like content about like a fake, you know, either the top spots that you got to visit in El Salvador, and it turns out to be just burdeles and, you know, just places that you shouldn't go.
Right.
And the comments on those is like the Salvies are like, you know, oh, I can't wait until I go back because I can't wait to reconnect with my culture. I'm going to add these places to my list. And then everybody who's from El Salvador is like, no le hagas caso.
That's funny,
Yeah,
man.
but yeah, that's basically kind of how Bayuncos came to be. And what it
I
is
love
now.
that too, because it shows that there was also a need for it, right? Like when something like that takes off, it's because people are hungry and ready to take in that kind of content, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I go back to what we were talking about, how people, you know, felt overlooked. Our community felt overlooked and felt underserved in a certain way. Like maybe they wanted, and like I said, well, we weren't the first platform to be out there promoting Salvadoreño culture or connecting with Salvadoreño culture. But the thing is that I guess there's something to be said when you add just that little seasoning of like humor. You know what I mean? I think that a part of our experience in El Salvador and here growing up or abroad as Salvadoreños is that we do like to, we use our own experience, like we almost kind of like laugh at our own pain. We make light of our own suffering. And so it's a way for us to kind of like heal on the go.
Right.
Does that make sense? And so Bayuncos, although not say a political platform or an activism platform or, you know, something that's, you know, pretty, I want to say bipartisan in the grand scheme of things, uses more our experiences, our culture, and so that in a way that somebody could see it, identify it, and be like, if they're a part of our culture, be like, oh yeah, that's so true. That is us. You know, we do that. And if they're not a part of our culture, maybe they're another Central American, you know, from another country, they'll be like, oh yeah, we also have the same stuff. Wow, that's pretty, amazing. Or people who have never seen it before, or never been exposed to it before, be like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I've never heard of this country, El Salvador, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that was initially what drew me in, is like finding someone tell the nuances that you feel when you feel unseen, right? Mm-hmm. Like I said, especially being Canadian and in Toronto, there's a lot of Latino cultures that I don't belong to. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I can share some of the nuances or that they understand.
Yeah.
But seeing the content you were making, I'm like, this guy's hitting it on the nose, the stuff that I grew up hearing, my mom, my pops, you know, like that's what I loved about it. So I think it's interesting too hearing you speak, because when I met you, or just even right now, I'm like, this guy for sure was born in El Salvador. I'm like, this guy 100% is probably maybe living between, I don't know, like I didn't know what the situation was, but you're born here. You're
born, raised here. Yeah.
How is your Spanish so good? Like, how did you connect to the culture?
So the thing is, my mom and dad, I think it was two things. Number one, my mom and dad did not allow me to speak Spanglish. So it was one language or the other. And so that was number one. And then number two, my mom and dad also, they're mostly my dad, you know, but like both of them are pretty traditional. They're pretty old school Salvadoreño, like pre-war Salvadoreño, if you want to call it that. And so they, let's just say, like, you know, my household was one that you did not really want to upset my dad. And because he could have somewhat of an unpredictable response to the smallest things. So one thing that they would have definitely found annoying was if I were to have come home with a different accent of a different neighboring Latino community, or using different slang of a different neighboring community.
They would have called you out for it.
Or worse.
Or worse.
Or worse. And so the thing is,
Tráeme el cincho, right?
Or kneeling on rice, beans.
Oh shoot,
you know,
that's crazy. Bro.
And over the couch and getting lashes to the back window, stuff like So it's like, you know, not that was like the everyday, you know, but knowing that was also like the possibility, you know, you kind of fall in line. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I haven't even done today, still because of that fear of my mom.
Oh wow!
I don't have any tattoos, you know, and so because of that, There was stuff that I hadn't even told my mom and dad that I had done, or trouble that I had gotten into that I had to get myself out of because I could not, I didn't want to upset them. Just like that.
And do you still feel that way today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's called trauma.
That's
called trauma.
Deep embedded trauma there, bro. Yeah.
And so, but what I was going to say is, but going back to the main question, yeah, that's how it was that I guess, speak like this. And then I want to say that was from that side. On the other side is that I always had like a strong affinity towards my family members, my older family members, my elders. So like my tios, my grandmas and stuff, especially the ones that would visit on occasion from El Salvador. And so I would always be at their side. I would be, with my tias or in the kitchen or in the living room, talking, and laughing. And so it's one of those things where it's you also kind of like learn to associate, part of your identity is, familial. It's something that has to do with, family. And I've identified a lot more with them, I felt, just because there was something there that it was even hard to replicate with my cousins my own age, because my cousins my own age are very different. Mm-hmm. They almost don't speak Spanish. Some of them at this age had to learn or had to relearn the Spanish that they had once forgotten because of work. Now maybe they're dealing with customers or I have a cousin who's a teacher. He now has to deal with parents who only speak Spanish.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. And so, and my sister, for example, she's a doctor of physical therapy. So she also has to deal with a lot of say patients who don't speak Spanish. I mean, who don't speak English.
Right.
I think I might have said who don't speak.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Who don't speak English. And so, whereas with me, sometimes I would be like the, not the go-between, but just the person who knew how to communicate with my family, with my elders. And I'm not the oldest one of my cousin groups. I think I'm like the second oldest here in LA. But even then, it was something that I always retained because of, say, my environment, and then both at home and then just with family, like the rest of the family that either came with my family from escaping the war and lives here now, or the ones that would travel back and forth from El Salvador.
Yeah, our culture is very interesting too, man, especially because you're right. I think there are a lot of immigrant parents that try to keep their kids in line and preserve culture by instilling that you only speak Spanish at home. Mm-hmm. I had that too. My Spanish is good, but your Spanish is better than mine, bro. Your Spanish is really good, right? And like I said, you kept all the nuances. Mm-hmm. And something that I heard you say multiple times now is, Latinos, specifically Salvadoreños, that will adopt a different slang, right? Mm-hmm. I would say I'm probably guilty of that too. Growing up in Toronto, a very multicultural city, you'll end up using like a Nicaraguense's word or, or something like that, or they'll end up using a Salvadorian word.
Yeah,
right?
It happens. Yeah.
But in terms of that, I mean, what do you say to somebody who's like a young Salvadoreño? Do you try to encourage them preserve our slang, preserve our culture, preserve our words? Is that what you encourage?
It's something that I would encourage, mostly because, see, on the one hand, it's interesting seeing it's almost a similar struggle, but it happens in a different way both here and in El Salvador. Whereas both here, Salvi kids, and in El Salvador, like Salvadoreño kids, they want that. They know, they're very well aware of where they stand in the grand scheme of things, like on the world stage, which is they're not on it, for the most part. And so and part of our humor is that is kind of like knowing that we're from this tiny country that doesn't mean anything to anybody, but the thing is that there is this aspiration still for maybe someday somebody knows what El Salvador is, somebody knows who who we are, what we're about, where we're located on a map, what Central America even is. Like I had back in the day, when I was in college, people would be like, oh yeah, where are you from? Like, oh, El Salvador. Or my family's from El Salvador. it's in Central America. Oh, I'm from Central America too. Kansas.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. Stuff like that. And so the thing is that
So he was thinking more like Middle America.
yeah, like the dead center of yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it's crazy like that.
Wow.
And so, but the thing is that knowing that they have this aspiration to one day be a little bit more known. They have, on the one hand, they have that aspiration, but on the other hand, they also allow themselves to succumb to the influence of another greater power. And so, for example, you will go down to El Salvador today, and the biggest surprise that I think you will find is how many taco spots there are. And
is it rivaling how many pupuserias there is? Like, is it on that level?
It's pretty. I wouldn't say it's like close, but let's say for every maybe 3 pupusa comedores or stands or whatever, there's at least maybe 1 taco spot, at least in San Salvador. And so, on the one hand, it's like they want people to know about them, about our stuff. But on the other end, they're so easily influenced by the outside that they don't. That sometimes they put a little bit more attention to that kind of stuff than their own. Like you'll talk about, oh, what music do you listen to? What movies do you like? What TV do you like? And it's all, there's nothing in El Salvador or very little in El Salvador that they themselves don't really enjoy. You know, you talk about maybe even like now, even to the newer generations, you talk about, say, some of the more traditional things, like, you know, right now it's October, so, you know, you talk about the scary stories that we heard as kids, you know, talking about La Ciguanaba, La Carretilla, El Padre Sin Cabeza, and El Cadejo, all of them, you know, there's many more. And people will actually be like, what's that? Mm-hmm. You know, down there. For me, like a very big thing was one of the last times that I was there, I was kicking it with some of my nephews who are in high school. And I made a comment about Los Hermanos Flores. They didn't know who Los Hermanos Flores was.
Wow.
That's crazy.
It's probably Salvador's greatest band, right?
You're like probably one of the most recognizable outside of El Salvador at this point, yeah.
Before you continue, are they not playing Coachella?
They are playing Coachella.
They're playing Coachella this year coming up, right?
They're Grammy nominated.
That's
incredible. For the first time, yeah.
Wow.
So that's where they're at. So the thing is, for them to not know, it's like, that's crazy. But this is their stuff. That's the crazy thing. It's like, it's their own stuff, but they're kind of like leaving it off to the side to pursue and consume foreigner stuff. And now what's happening here with the Salvi community is mostly that. It's like, instead of looking inward, a lot of the times, it's a lot easier for them to be influenced by the outside. And I always think to myself, it's like, you know, when have you ever heard a Mexican homie basically adopt the culture of someone else? Whenever you heard a Puerto Rican homie or a Dominican homie or a Cuban homie, a Colombian homie adopt the culture of somebody else? Never.
That's a great point.
Never.
And why do you think that is? Why do they stand on their culture to the point where they're willing to, you know, blast it out to the world? Why do you think, what's the differentiation with Salvadoreños that might not necessarily have that pride? Where does that lack of pride come from?
I think it's because part of it is that their cultures have definitely left a very notable mark. They have contributed in something to the greater Latino or Latin American, Caribbean diaspora. They have left something behind. Mexico has left, you know, music, film, TV. Mexico is very much like the United States of the Latin American world. It has the same kind of positioning the way that the United States does in the English-speaking world.
That's right.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's like they've contributed a ton. Much deserved. Colombia, music, food, women. I mean, let's be real here. You know, Puerto Rico has same thing. Music, food, women, a very long history of salsa, for example. Even though it's Cuban rhythms originally, you know, it all kind of came to be what it is called today.
And even modern day pop music, reggaeton, everything.
Exactly.
Right?
And see, okay, and that's the other thing. Like, reggaeton technically, this is going to be a hot take, but reggaeton is
Panameño. What are you going to say?
More, yeah, it's more closely Panameño, but Puerto Ricans took it to a whole new level.
Yeah.
And they've made it that much more accessible to the rest of the world. So that's their big contribution, and so everybody at some point has contributed something, but El Salvador yet still has not contributed anything like that to the greater scheme of things. If anything, for a very long time, El Salvador was known for not so good things, the violence, the gangs and stuff like that, despite it being, or the war, but despite it being a very beautiful tropical country with really, awesome food, with really warm, loving people and beautiful women. Unfortunately, it's just been something that, because we haven't really left our mark that way, I think that there's not the same level of pride that maybe other communities might have about their own culture and about their own flag. And in addition to that, I think it's also because we are a minority within a minority. It could be very common that there's a group of, say, Puerto Ricans or Dominicans, and there's like one Salvadoreño in the group, or a group of Mexicans, one Salvadoreño in the group. And so at that point, it's kind of like, it's only a matter of time before that Salvadoreño starts adopting a little bit more of whatever those cultures are, instead of really digging in their heels and being like, no, I'm Salvadoreño. I appreciate your culture. I love it. I love you, but I'm Salvadoreño. You know what I mean? That doesn't usually happen like that.
You know what, man? I have to say, I've never said this halfway through an interview, but I'm really enjoying this conversation and your take on it, because I've never, again, man, I've sat down with so many creatives and so many artists, but I've never sat down with somebody to talk about the Salvadoreño identity. This is something I've never done. So hearing your perspective and how clear it is, and you're very intentional with your approach of even content and everything you're doing. So I for like, even leading up to this, I was like, I definitely want to talk about Salvadoreño representation with you. And you're starting to touch on that in terms of like mainstream media, what the world consumes and what they know of Salvadoreños. For the longest time was gangs and violence. Now it's Bukele and what Bukele's doing. But in terms of like an entertainment stage where we're, like you said, contributing something to maybe pop culture or to like the world stage, what do you think it is that we can contribute that probably will be something we're moving in the direction to contribute towards? Is it comedy with like the homie Jose and what you're doing? Or is it like going to be music? What do you think it is that we're on the verge of starting to contribute to?
I think that we are just as capable of contributing anything that we really desire. The question is, will we have the support of our own people? And in many cases, the answer sometimes is no. Because, again, Salvadoreños have... because we understand our role in the greater Latin American stage, we understand that we're not really seen as the cream of the crop by anybody. And so if you have the chance as a Salvadoreño, two artists, one that is from another country that has had a long track record of actually putting out good music, like for example, and somebody from El Salvador, they're likely going to go with this guy, even though this guy might actually deliver a quality product.
Right.
If anything, they're going to go out of their way to support this guy when he comes to El Salvador and buy tickets that they could barely afford to go see this guy. This guy could have a show, and then they'd be like, ¿para qué lo voy a ir a ver a ese? It's kind of sad.
It is sad, yeah.
And so the thing is, I think that there's a lot of talent and there's a lot of great creativity and art in El Salvador and even within our community that I think could be appreciated by not just us, by other people. But I don't think that it's going to happen until
we support ourselves.
Well, what I was going to say was that I think that the only way for us to get our own support is to look beyond the Salvadoreño community. Look beyond the Salvadoreño community. And if all of a sudden, for example, this has happened multiple times with different people, but like say someone like Alvaro Torres, probably the greatest cantautor, singer that we've had. And so beautiful voice, beautiful music. He didn't blow up in El Salvador. He had to leave El Salvador and go to Mexico. Blew up in Mexico. Finally, once he did, then Salvadoreños were like, oh yeah, he's one of us. Same thing what happened, recently, the astronaut dude. Didn't like it might have not necessarily been part of his identity that he advertised. He just happened to be an astronaut working for NASA, went to space and everything. But when so he made it. You made it into space.
You made it.
You made it. Yeah. And so he made it. But the thing is, it's not that he was like advertising, oh yeah, yo soy salvadoreño. But then what happened? In El Salvador, they found out, oh, he's Salvadoreño? Let's have him back and let's roll out the red carpet from him. Oh yeah, he's one of us. He made it. He represents us. He's always been one of us. You know what I mean? And so the thing is,
it's like they want to support once they see.
Yeah, like let me see you do good stuff first. Outside, like when other people start singing your praises, that's when I'll finally support you, kind of stuff. And so it's one of those things like that, and that's why I'm so thankful with how far Bayuncos has come, because it's like knowing that about our people, this whole way, the way that everything has happened with Bayuncos it's still surprising, because it's like I'm like, wait a minute, something doesn't make sense here, because on the other hand, I know us to be this way, but all of a sudden there's this level of support on Bayuncos, which I'm thankful for, and I appreciate every single day. It's just, it's crazy that that's the result, knowing that this is where things normally are. Does that make sense?
Of course. I mean, this is something I think about, even in my own career. I started in entertainment. I've done all these great interviews. But I've always been more on the Anglo side, even more so on the hip hop side, as a journalist, as someone working in entertainment. But my Salvadoreño side has never. It's not that I didn't try. I actually started the first Latino hip hop radio show in all of Toronto and all of Canada. I was the first guy.
Nice.
Right? That didn't take off. That didn't launch my career. But when I started doing English hip hop stuff, my career started to grow. So naturally, you're going to go where you're getting paid and when you're doing stuff, right? So I think it's a similar conversation that I have with lots of Salvadoreños, where it's like, are we supporting ourselves? Are we supporting creatives? How are we supporting, if we are?
Yeah.
And I look at, again, your page, and you've done a great job, I think, of uniting Salvadoreños under one kind of community online. And it's informative, it's funny, but you found success in bringing Salvadoreños together, right? What would you say to somebody who's, a creative or somebody that's Salvadoreño, but they're not finding the support that we're talking about? For instance, I'll give you a good example. I have a homie named Bebe Boy.
Okay.
Great artist. Maybe you've heard him. He's a Salvadoreño. He's from Toronto, but he does reggaeton. His music is popping. I would put him up there with any reggaeton artist. He's great. But when he drops new music, it's not like it doesn't blow up. It doesn't necessarily pop, but he's a very talented guy.
Okay.
He's now starting to tap more into the Salvadoreño audience. He's starting to go down to the DMV, connect with people there. Another big Salvi population, right?
Very big, yeah.
And he's starting to see his numbers grow. But what do you say to somebody who's a Salvadoreño creative in any aspect, whether it's music, culinary, whatever, and you're trying to find that support from your culture, from your people? You've been successful at it. What would you recommend to other people?
I would say, well, first, what happened with Bayuncos is definitely like it's an outlier. It's not the norm, when it comes to this kind of stuff. But I will say to someone, the Salvadoreño creative, trying to make it, is do your thing, deliver a quality product, but no matter where you go, no matter where that takes you, because it can take you to great places. It might not always be within our community. It might likely be outside of our community, but no matter where it is that you go, never forget who you are. Never forget your flag. Never forget your people. And so it's one of those things where I've come to find that when you still have your head screwed on straight and you keep the most authentic, parts of yourself still there, still true, no matter where it is that life takes you, you will always be able to have a home with your people, and they will love you for that. It's very different if you come and try to aggressively be like, hey, I'm Salvadoreño, I'm doing this. That's a different conversation.
Right.
And at that point, because in El Salvador, te van a mandar a comer mierda. They'll be like, so what? And so there's like, they'll be like, there's 50 other dudes just like you, probably doing it better.
Right.
But if you can actually just do your thing, but not lose that side of who you are. It doesn't necessarily have to be the thing that you wear on your sleeve, but as long as it's a part of you and people see that it's a part of you, I think that that's where the sweet spot is.
Yeah. Well said, man. I think that as Salvadoreños, we're all we have a sense of pride, but I think you're right. I think we're all waiting for an era, for somebody to usher a new era where we're received differently because we're known for something, And I think it starts with people like yourself that have built a platform in a community, because that's the start. That's like the foundation of what needs to happen, is people coming together online right now, virtually, to just like take part in pride and being prideful of like who we are as a people, right? What would you say? I mean, you've done a great job of this era of Bayuncos, right? Of getting it started, uniting people. What's the next phase of Bayuncos? Where do you see Bayuncos going?
Man, so the move set me back just because of time and schedule and everything like that, because we had to basically, we got a notice to vacate because they sold our building in Long Beach. So they kicked everybody out of the building and gave us 60 days. So had stuff in the pipe, but we were basically going to start doing Bayunco stuff that is not necessarily Salvadoreño, but it still retains the essence of what it means to be Bayunco, to be silly. And so we shot our very first YouTube video, I want to say before the move, where we used our appearance to sneak onto a yacht party.
Right. I saw this. This was hilarious. Yeah.
And so we want to do more content like that.
Right.
Because it explores, it's in English. That's the crazy part. There were people who likely saw that video from my audience that I haven't even put it all that much out on, TikTok or Instagram. But there are the people who saw it from maybe TikTok or Instagram probably saw me speak English for probably the first time, which is the crazy part.
Right. They're like, yo, this guy's English is perfect.
Yeah, because most people think that maybe I only speak Spanish.
Right.
So, because most of my content is in Spanish. So the thing is that we want to do more things like that where it's silly. It might not necessarily be Salvadoreño, but if you notice, like in that first video, there is a part in the intro where I am wearing my Selecta jersey. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm not wearing, or even though I might not necessarily be, El Salvador, que no sé qué. The video has nothing to do with El Salvador, but it's there. It's there on my chest. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's kind of like in the background a little bit. But someone who knows would see that and be like, oh, he's one of us.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Of
so
course.
we want to do more stuff like that.
I see you repping, man, and like obviously you got the chumpa.
Yeah, chumpa. Right? Yeah, had to.
Tell me about. So you got merch too.
Yes.
So the chumpa is the first drop, or what's going on here?
No,
with the
so we've had merch for a while, just because it started off with wanting to have something unique to wear in videos,
right?
And then so I would make a few fun designs and stuff like that, like what I call like now vintage Bayuncos. And so the thing was that people actually started wanting the same shirt. So like probably the most popular one was taking the Pilsner logo, and then instead of it saying Pilsner, just writing Puchica.
Right.
And so that one like sold like hotcakes, like pan caliente. Mm-hmm. And then we did other drops and stuff. But finally, what happened with Chumpa, how this came about, it was actually a collective. It's a collaboration between a few people and myself. So it's Jose, it's myself, and it's a few other guys that are behind the scenes that we've worked with for quite some time already. And it was essentially their idea, like, okay, we have this concept, how can we make it better? And so that's where they tapped me, they tapped Jose, to basically put in our 2 cents and to essentially be ambassadors for this thing. And so far, it's actually been like it's been amazing because now it's the merch is actually in a place where it's doing anything greater things that say just the standalone Bayuncos merch has done so far. Where now they're like sponsoring athletes and stuff like that. Like Ashley Wed, the mountain climber Alfa Karina Arue, who just she's the first Salvadoran to climb Mount Everest.
Wow.
And so we just worked with her for her most recent climb. So it's something a lot bigger. It looks like just a jacket. It looks like just whatever that says Chumpa, but this is what we're doing behind the scenes that we haven't even released yet. Just because sometimes the machine runs faster than you do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that's a little bit about Chumpa.
Congrats, though, man. That's amazing. Let me ask you in terms of like being a creator in this climate, in this economy, is this your full-time job? Are you able to live and survive doing Bayuncos and doing your merch?
At this point, it's one of those things where we're still trying to figure out how to best do it because it does have its ebb and flows. Sometimes you'll have like a brand deal that comes in that pays a certain amount. It's like not the best, but it'll get you through the month or a month and a half or whatever. And then sometimes there is a brand deal that comes in that will pay you like the equivalent of like a year's salary for like 4 hours of work.
Right.
And those are rare. They're like solar eclipses. They don't come often, but when they do, now you have to think backwards. Okay, how am I going to make this last? Or how am I going to make this, use this to do the next thing? And so, and then the merch, it's I have this thing where I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to market it towards the audience, because the thing is, I don't want to spam them all the time, buy my merch, buy my merch, buy my merch. I figured if I just wear it in the content, and I have it on my Instagram shop, at least, I haven't even put it on TikTok yet, but that maybe that's the best way that people could actually get their hands on it.
Right.
It's a very low pressure type of thing. Sometimes it's worth it to get on the stories and plug it there, be a little bit more direct. Sometimes it's worth it to actually do like a whole like ad post. But for the most part, and even this year we actually played with a little bit of e-commerce and ads and stuff. But for the most part, I'm still trying to figure out that. But the big thing, brand deals, and the merch. Now, Chumpa looking to actually do a little bit more next year in the books, because Chumpa wants to sponsor basically live events now. And so that means getting on the road, going to different cities, performing, and something that, again, there's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Right.
And so now this is the kind of, I think the next era of everything that we're doing is the going together.
That leads me into, I was going to ask you too, like, who is Bayuncos? So Bayuncos, I know you're the face of it, but you always refer to it as we. So who's the Bayuncos team? Like, who's rolling with you?
So the thing is, like, Bayuncos in a weird way was always meant to be like a collective thing. And so it definitely is me. Like whenever I say Bayuncos, I usually refer to, like, I tend to, just for grammar basis, or like just grammar basics, like in emails and professional correspondence, I'll usually say we because it ends in a OS. So it sounds like a plural thing. And I feel like if I say I, it
would be Bayunco.
Then it would be Bayunco, and it wouldn't necessarily make sense. But as far as the team goes, it's, I want to say it's the people who come out on videos with me, and it's either on a semi-regular basis or whoever. I would account even a little bit of Ambiente Central as part of it too. I would count Jose, I would count Nelson, I would count, anybody who has contributed, it's like, we are Bayuncos, and so maybe, and for me, it was not something that I had thought at the very beginning of like, okay, this is what I want my name to be, because I didn't have the goal for this thing to be what it is today. It was just, we were having fun, and then it just became this. But, a lot of the time people just call me El Bayunco.
Right.
Or Tony El Bayunco.
Right.
I'm walking down the street, and people call out, hey, Bayunco. And so
You get recognized out like in LA on the
Yeah.
streets? Yeah. People
Yeah.
know, yeah.
and in the most random places sometimes. Like for me, the craziest part was I was playing a show that has nothing to do with Bayuncos, has nothing to do with even tropical music. I was playing a big band show at Catalina's in Hollywood. It's a
Okay.
jazz club. So, so again, everybody in the band, you know, they're all American dudes. They're, you know, white guys, black guys, you know, stuff. And then there's me on piano. And then the people in the kitchen, like there's the audience, nobody knows who the hell I am. The rest of the guys, you know, I've been my colleagues for many, many years before Bayuncos. Some of them probably don't even know about Bayuncos. And then, but the funny thing was that the people in the kitchen happened to recognize me. They were like, you know, like he's,
Right.
yeah. So they're like, you know, so they like came out to the front and stuff. They're like taking like videos of me, like, and they're like, they wanted to get pictures and, you know, I'm saying hi to them and everything. And they were like, you know, what are you doing here? I'm like, I'm working, dude. What are you? Is like, this is what I was doing before Bayuncos. And so so that for me was probably like the craziest thing is to get recognized like in weird places like that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a cool fusion of worlds for you, right? And I wanted to ask you about the fusion of music and what you do, because I noticed you integrate a lot of your music into the memes and into the things that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about like, so are you like a session player, like musician? Like what? Obviously, you're still doing this, right?
Yeah. So I am. I can't believe I'm about to talk about this. So since 5 years old, classical piano.
Wow.
And so
But why did you say you can't believe you're going to talk about this?
Because I feel like if these worlds are separate.
Right.
And so because you talk, if you try to talk to Salvadoreños or like, oh yeah, I play classical piano or whatever, they'll be like, you know, whatever, dude, you know, or like, tócame la samposana mejor, you know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, so the thing is that like I started in classical piano at 5 years old, and I played all the way until my second year in college, where I kind of was starting to have like just like a crossroads where I was like, do I really want to be doing this for the rest of my life? And do I really want to? Can I see myself doing this, being a concert pianist for the rest of my life, playing classical
And
music?
is that the trajectory you were on? It was to become a concert pianist?
Well, that's the thing. There was like, for me, the whole music thing, it wasn't something that even I felt more than anything, like looking back now, like if it was more the encouragement of other people, which is definitely not typical in our communities, but I had everybody literally that I knew was encouraging me to stick with this, to not let this go, to study it at the conservatory level, because they said that if I didn't, then it would have been a lot of wasted talent and years and money and stuff spent on this. And so my mom and dad, you know, worked really hard to be able to afford, you know, classical piano lessons. Like I was the only brown kid taking classical piano lessons, certificate of merit over there in Santa Monica. So every single Wednesday, or sometimes it was Tuesday, sometimes it was Wednesday, but we would drive all the way from like by LAX, you know, Hawthorne, Lenox, you know, Linwood, that area, to go and take piano lessons in Santa Monica. And when I would do the piano recitals, it was all, you know, white kids, Jewish kids, Asian kids, you know, of like money, like means that were from the West Side. And then there was me. And so the thing is, like, I was basically expected to stick with it, even though like I didn't really know exactly what it was that I wanted to study other than that. But I felt like if there was other things that I wanted to do, but it was always, everybody was like, no, you have to study music, you know, blah, blah. And so, because I don't come from a musical family, but
right.
they just saw that in me. And so the thing was, it's because I spent a lot of time between practicing my actual repertoire of, you know, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, you know, all the composers. I spent a lot of time at the piano working other stuff out. learning other songs by ear, playing with different, sounds, and actually exploring what it is to play the piano, not play music on the piano, not play songs on the piano, but actually what it is to actually, how does the instrument work? How does harmony work? Even though I'm learning, music theory and everything at the same time and reading everything, there's something to be said about just sitting alone and there's nothing on your music stand on the piano and you're just diving into like exploration, like what happens if I do this and stuff. So
Right.
you really can like go deep down the rabbit hole. And that's what I was doing as a kid, especially using my ears. So the thing is, by the time that I was already my second year in college, I was like, I don't know, I feel like if I enjoy that more than the actual gymnastics of going and perfecting a piece that a million other pianists have already played, and I want to do a little bit more of that. So the thing is that I ended up switching over to jazz, and so when I switched over to jazz, that's where I got to do a lot more of that. There was other skills that I had to learn, but it felt like if I was almost learning how to play all over again, like almost having to start from ground zero.
Right.
So bad that my very first year in el Conservatorio de Jazz, like actually Bob Cole Conservatory of Music, Cal State Long Beach, my very first year I almost got kicked out because I wasn't at the level that the other pianists that have already been playing jazz were.
Right.
Because music school I came to learn is not to learn, it's to refine. It's to refine the skills that you have already built up to that point. You're not there to be taught. And so, but I had to, so like that was essentially like my whole journey when it came to like the actual coming up in music was actually studying, actually playing, actually graduating del conservatorio. And then ever since then was just like gigs and shows and backing up other artists, always in the background, never, and I wasn't really interested in being like the front person. I was happy being off to the side. But the thing was that how this all came to be with Bayuncos, I always wondered what the very first thing that I was going to release was going to be with music if I ever got to that point. But I never thought it was going to be cumbias. I never thought it was going to be cumbias because like in music school, you kind of have, or like you kind of learn along the way to almost like look down on other musical styles, even though you might be listening to gangster rap and reggaeton and all the other stuff that we love because especially me being from LA, all the stuff that we grew up listening to, or cumbias too. But intellectual wise, you're constantly looking down on other musical styles because they're not as complex. Mm-hmm. They're not as there's not a lot of harmonic information or progression in other musical styles. They're very simple. And the thing is that it's because for people who have music schooling, that's what they like. They like the complexity. They like the intellectualism behind the music. But for us, the common folk, it's more like that stuff doesn't matter. It could be a banger that's like 1-2 chords, maybe 3, because it's about the groove, it's about the party, it's about the vibes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I always thought, I was like, am I like kind of like on the fence? Like, what's going to be that first thing? Like, is it going to be a classical thing? Like, is it going to be jazz? Like, and I wrote several, especially while in college, jazz compositions. I have like a whole, like, I think 20 salsa songs that have never seen the light of day.
Wow.
That is more up the alley of like, say, La Sonora Ponceña, the arrangement style. But I never thought that the very first thing would be cumbias. And it all happened because literally one day I had the ring light set up. I told La Chelita, press record, I'm going to make up a song on the spot. I've been drumming on the couch like that ever since I was a kid.
Right.
And then I made up un doble sentido, that now is known La Cumbia La Pupusa, but that was improvised.
Wow.
And so that's why it was so funny that, where I'm like literally saying, y si te doy la yuca, vos me vas a dar la pupusa. It's like, so that blew up just on social media. And then people were asking me like, oh, so is this real? Where can I find the real song? Is it on Spotify, Apple Music and stuff? And I was like, no, like I made this up. And then people were saying, well, you should record this because it's actually dope. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay. So then that would probably be the very first time how I combine these two elements. I think recently the last thing to go super viral was when I first moved into the new spot was doing laundry and then noticing that the laundry machines they play a song when they're done. They're Samsung.
Right.
And so I one day, like doing laundry, I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to find that song on social media or like out there, and I'm just going to layer myself playing cumbia over it.
Mm-hmm.
Dumbass idea, but it just went.
It's hilarious, bro. I've seen the one where like the lady gets hit by a goat or something, and then bro, I've seen, they're hilarious, bro. That's what I like. I love and I really enjoy your fusion of comedy and music, man. So, but for anyone who's watching now you know Bayunco is classically trained, man.
Yes,
like a classically trained pianist. So that's incredible, man.
Yeah, that's one thing that I actually haven't really advertised that much on social media, just because the audience doesn't care about that. Right. They really don't care about that. Like, you could tell them, oh yeah, I went to school for this, blah, 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 piano. And they'll be like, they can't connect with it. Right. And even then, I guarantee you, if I were to do a jazz show, and sell tickets, and to the people who come, they'll be like, tocame el peluquero.
Right.
Tocame la enfermera.
Right.
So it's like, you also have to meet people where they're at. So what do they like, and what's the most authentic to me that's always been there? Cumbia.
Cumbia for sure.
Tropical cumbia.
Yeah. If you're Salvadoreño, you grew up in a Salvadoreño home, you grew up with cumbia.
Yeah.
It was always around. It makes me think of my mom, you know what I mean? But it's part of our, it's deeply embedded in our culture.
Yeah.
But look, man, I want to end on some lighthearted stuff. I want to ask you, I've been on a hunt, because I'm fairly new to LA. I've been on a hunt to find the best pupusa. I had to ask you. I'm like, man, I have to ask this guy. And you can't say your mom's, because everybody says, oh, my mom's pupusa. Like, actually, like a restaurant or a spot that someone can go to in public.
Okay.
What is the best pupusa spot in LA?
So I will say this as like un preámbulo.
Yeah.
Basically, I think that the person who had the best answer to a question similar to this is Jose, who he basically says, there is no best pupusa in the world. What you're going to call the best pupusa is the one that tastes the most how you grew up eating it, how your mom, how your tias made it. That's what you're going to consider the best pupusa. It's a very subjective question. Mm-hmm. But if you ask, say, my personal preference, that's a different thing. So my personal preference, I'm very, very partial to the pupuserias from the neighborhood that I grew up in over there by the airport. So there's two that come to mind, El Cerro Verde and Los Chorros.
Okay.
And so I actually just took Country Boy Earl, another creator. He's from Texas. He's a black guy, but he's fallen in love with El Salvador. And so he was there this past weekend. He called me while he was getting, I think, his teeth cleaned. Yeah, but 2 weeks ago when he was visiting here in LA, I took him there, and he's like, "Dope, he's hit."
They slap. Okay.
Yeah, because I don't know. It's like I really enjoy their pupusas. They're the ones that definitely taste to me like childhood. Again, going back to what Jose said, it has to do with how you were brought up in your childhood. Right. My mom's, I don't really care too much for my mom's pupusas.
Oh, you're the first person I've ever met to say that.
Well, it's kind of complicated. It's complicated. So coming from a very, traditional household, there was a lot of machismo. And so what my dad said goes, or what my dad says goes. And so my dad, being, del Canton, the Canton El Zapote over there in La Paz, as far as I understood, I guess that he was disgusted by the way that they kept pigs in El Canton.
Right.
And so he had this very strong aversion to pork because of that. Not that it made him sick, not that, or
he just didn't enjoy chicharrón.
Yeah,
right?
he just didn't want, well, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he just didn't want anything to really have to do with pork like that. So he didn't allow my mom to cook with manteca, with lard. And so that gives a certain flavor to pupusas. Like to me, I feel like if it's like when I make them at home, I use lard, and and mine don't taste anything like my mom's, but you'll find that like my mom's pupusas by other Salvadoreño standards, by most Salvadoreño standards, are going to be a little bit too dry. And it's more because of the way that my dad wants my mom to make them. And so, and interestingly enough, okay, so he has a problem with manteca, but not chicharrón.
Oh, interesting.
Not la revuelta. So figure that one out. I don't know.
So he would be down to eat a revuelta, but just no manteca to make the pupusa.
I guess, yeah.
Oh,
but then the other thing is like, okay, then when we would go to pupuserias as kids, why was it not a problem there?
Right.
But at home, it's a problem. So again, very traditional.
You got to take this up with your pops, man.
Yeah,
I think you need to sit down.
I don't know about that one. But but it doesn't make sense. Basically, it's like a contradiction. But like a good traditional, Salvadoreño man, full of contradictions.
Yes. Another contradiction that I find in lots of pupuserias that I go to is that the revuelta sometimes is all three, pork, cheese, and beans, and sometimes the revuelta is only pork and cheese.
Yeah.
In your opinion or in your perspective, what is a revuelta? Like, what is the correct
Well, that's
revuelta?
the thing. It's like I feel like traditionally, they say that traditionally in El Salvador, in certain regions, a revuelta was considered pork and cheese. And so, but adding the beans also was like, I think it was, I don't know. I think it was all depending on who you ask. I think. Because you already know how people are, like, especially our people. Like if they didn't experience it as kids, or if they didn't have it that way as kids, or ever heard or of something as they were, when they were kids, it doesn't exist. It's fake. It's false. That's the way that they take it. So it depends on who you ask. If like maybe from some part of El Salvador, that was one thing that was considered traditional. Another part of El Salvador, it could have been that it was all three. So I think it has to do with the individual pupusera making the pupusas, will tell you, oh, this is the way that my family or mi mamá me enseñó, mi abuela, mi bisabuela me enseñó a echar pupusas así de esta manera. And so at that point, and I guarantee you put her against one who will say differently, they will duke it out right.
In my home growing up, a revuelta was all three.
Yeah, me too.
Frijol, queso, chicharrón. Like that was a revuelta.
Me too.
And I only discovered there was another version of a revuelta going to pupuserias, where I'm like, why? I would ask for a revuelta, and I would be greatly disappointed, bro, when I wouldn't get all three. So I'm like, I had to clear it up with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good response. You're going to get a different answer from different people, from different regions, right?
Yeah. I mean, even like, for example, if you go to El Salvador today, you will see that even between Occidente and Oriente, that even like the food is different, or even the way that you have pupusas is different. Like over there in San Miguel, they eat pupusas with mayo and W sauce.
Well, I've never tried that, bro. Wow.
I'm gonna tell you this real quick. I love my people from San Miguel and Oriente and everything, but that style of pupusa is not my favorite. Yeah, I like them the Occidente way, probably because my family's Occidente. But.
I might have to try it though, just to try it. So con mayonesa?
Well, what it is the curtido is made with mayonesa, so it's almost
como cremosa.
It's almost like a coleslaw,
right?
But it's not sweet like a coleslaw. It's more mayo-y.
Okay.
And then they have that, and then instead of say la salsa de tomate, it's W sauce. But that's the way that they like them.
All right. I'm gonna have to try that now.
So it is what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Another question, another debate that always comes up is, tamal con hueso or sin hueso.
Okay. So they say, con el hueso que tiene más sabor que no sé qué. But for me, you know how annoying it is to be eating your tamal and then all of a sudden scrape the inside of your mouth with a chicken bone?
Right.
Or a pork bone. Well, your pork bones are a little bit different, but with a sharp chicken bone?
Right.
It's like the same thing with like the people who put olives in them and don't take the pit out of the olive, and then you're like,
Yeah.
For me, if you come to my house and I'm making tamales, it's gonna be chicken, garbanzo beans, potato, ejote.
No olives?
No olives.
Oh.
Yeah. no olives because of that. And then because like it's like one extra step to go and have to pit all of the olives and stuff. So make sure you don't break your teeth, you know. And the chicken, okay, and the chicken is going to be chicken breast. It's going to be chicken breast that's actually cut off the bone. And we're gonna. I've experimented both ways where I've either prepped the chicken beforehand, before putting it into the tamal, or doing the raw chicken and seasoning it and then letting it cook inside of the tamal. I think I like that way more.
Also, man, I've had problems with, you know, panes de pavo and there still being bones in the pavo too, in the pan.
Same thing.
I'm like, bro, like you got to take that bone out.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a bite.
Yeah.
And you know, wind up with bone in your mouth. That's dangerous too.
Same thing. Yeah. The panes con pollo or panes con chumpe, panes con pavo, it's like I want to say with the turkey, I would imagine that one's a little bit easier to see the bones because it's bigger. You know, it's a big ass bird, you know. But the chicken, you know, a chicken bone could be hiding in the middle of all of that stuff, and then you don't know until it's probably about to go down your esophagus.
Right.
And you can, you know. So do you want to have that happen? Maybe not. You know, how about no? Yeah. So it's like I'd rather just, you know, take all of that out and then just, you know, cook it that way.
Oh man, bro, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I want to end on one note of like Salvi pride, and I just want you to, you know, tell the people who are watching this, like, what makes you the most proud of being Salvadoreño, like, for you?
Ooh, dang, that's a tough question because I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. If there's anything that makes me proud to be Salvadoreño, I love the warmth of our people that is kind of hard to find outside of our community. Like maybe for us, it's a little bit harder to find outside of our community because like there's something about us that I really love how we will give you the shirt off our back. We will give you the last or the bigger plate of food, even though we're hungry. We'll take you in and, you know, put a Selecta jersey on you and treat you like one of us. Doesn't matter where you're from, doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter what you're about, but that's who we are. And one thing that I've found that to be true, you know, like both here in the States and in El Salvador, is that when people see that that you are visiting, or how would I say, when people are meeting you for the first time, there is that bond of just, it's a very human bond that despite, you know, all of the problems that we might have in our lives, all of our problems that we might have in society or the country, whatever, there still is that very human element that it's kind of hard to find in the world nowadays. That's one thing that makes me proud, that makes me happy to see, especially, you know, mi gente campesina in El Salvador, you know, like that level of just warmth and welcoming to people that are different from them.
I love that, bro. Thank you for coming through, man.
Yeah, you got it.
I appreciate you.